Welcome to the 99th meeting of the Albany Pine Bush Preserve Commission. I am doing introductions. I am Chris Hauber, the Executive Director, your Executive Director of the Pine Bush Commission, because we have a new Acting Director of Region 4 and also new Acting Board Chair, Keith Gertz, on my left. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
And I told him I wouldn't ask him to do introductions, and you'll see actually how hard this really is. To my right, we have Mike McLaughlin, representing the county. We have Elaine Bolchinian representing State Parks. We have Katie Bronson, new representative here from the Planning Department from the City of Albany. Harvey Alexander, citizen representative. Steve Rice, citizen representative. Nancy Pearson, citizen representative. Mike Lyons, representing the town of Colony. We have Rick Georgeson from Region 4 taking minutes for us. Don Sapos from the town of Gilman representing Ken Runyon, and John Bruff, citizen representative.
Very well.
Yay.
No mistakes.
Lucky again.
After 99 meetings.
Good point. So, can we consider the minutes from March 20th? And if anybody has any comments? And thank you, Margie. This is our first meeting that we're actually going to try and embrace technology a little more instead of printing all these packets. So Margie's going to project that on the screen for us as we move through. And this was a good one as a trial packet because it was over 120 pages. And we saved nearly a ream of paper.
A case.
A case. 4,200 plus pages. So,
Nice.
are there any comments on the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anybody here from the public that wishes to provide comment? No? Okay. Nobody from the public, thank you. Reports. Our acting chair, Keith, is there anything you want to report on?
No, I don't have anything to report.
Okay.
Now, the next meeting, you're going to have something.
even if it's like a general comment about the weather.
Okay. I can do that now. It's sunny.
See, that's good.
Okay.
And we got a good weekend. How about from the rest of the board? Are there anything else anybody would like to talk about? Comments? Reports? No? Okay. Moving along, my report. I usually try and point some things out in the update. I won't do that because there's some other things I want to talk about. But please don't overlook going through the update because it highlights all the things our staff have worked on over the last quarter. And as usual, there's a lot. And it's obviously very diverse. And it's always interesting to read, in my opinion. In the March meeting, we talked about the project that we were working on doing the strategic planning for the Discovery Center, which we call the Vision Strategy. We have a Discovery Center committee for that with Harvey, Steve, John, and Don sitting on that, working with our staff directly with Aaron, Wendy, and Jeff, and myself as this Vision Strategy team. And we also worked with this consultant, Shelley Bischoff from Conservation Impact, who's done well over 900 strategic plans for nonprofits and other conservation organizations, including government organizations like ours. Back in early April, I think it was the first or second week of April, I sent the final report, the executive summary to the full board. Some of you requested the full report. If any of you still haven't received that and would like it, I can get that to you. But there's the basic summary and the gist of this is that it's providing a strategic focus and direction for the Discovery Center, and as we realize going through this process, and anybody from the committee chime in, the focus for us moving ahead. And the conclusion is there's these 4 overarching goals, and we kind of summarize it quickly with awareness, knowledge, action, and partners. So bringing people, starting with awareness, helping people understand who we are and what we do, specifically the preserve, why it's important, why it's rare, why it's here, and then bringing them to knowledge, to not just be aware, but to understand and appreciate it. And then bringing them further to action. Action could be something as, could be volunteering, it could be joining them, becoming a member of the Friends group, but it could be as simple as if you live here as a neighbor, you recognize what's going on. When you see a clear cut of trees, you're not going to pick up the phone and yell at us because you understand why we're doing it. You may not like it, you may like it, but either way you understand it. So that's kind of the way we're moving towards this. And then finally, partners, the recognition is that partners, strategic partners, not just partners, but strategic partners, are those that really can help us move these goals forward, are a key part of getting it done. So that's kind of the summary of it. So the next phase is we started doing some operational planning internally with our staff, with this consultant, again, out of Colorado. She's coming back to do more of that in July, because we are now embracing or embarking on a marketing plan, which is really an audience development plan. It's a marketing plan if you're more of a profit, or a nonprofit if you're going into a capital campaign. For us, we recognize what we need is a constituency and to define that. And we can't reach our constituency if we don't know what it is and how to reach them. So that's the next phase. So we have, now with this committee again, we have a conference Skype call. Talk about technology, we're moving ahead. We have a Skype call Tuesday about this upcoming week, Tuesday the 24th. So
10 a.m.
good summary, okay? Anything else you want to add? I mean, it's an exciting, we've never done anything like this as the commission. We do our management plan, which is similar, but it's different. This is kind of organizational philosophy too. I mean, it embraces the management plan as well as the law, but it's a different way of approaching things, so.
Hey, Chris, I would add, as a participant, it's been a good process. We did gin up some pretty good emotions and passions because we have a large staff and a lot of stakeholders, and different people see different things, and different people have their own focus and priorities and things like that. And maybe at the outset you wouldn't think that that would be the case, but it was. But it was also a very positive experience, at least for me. There was nobody picked up their ball and bat and said, I'm leaving. Everybody, from my perspective, said, okay, I understand that better. Here's how I can sort of fine-tune my priorities to fit in there and to really advance this mission and this fundamental approach to this place. So it was a great process. It was good to go through. It was very productive.
The one point that I should point out is, one of the key points is that the Discovery Center is here to support the Commission's work in the preserve. That's what it's here to do. It's basically, like we've always said, it's the front door, but that's what it's here to do. And it's not just a nature center, it's an interpretive center. It's an interpretive center for one of the most globally rare habitats in the world. So as we walked out all puffed up, we said, well, it's one of the most important and globally rare interpretive centers in the world. So
It took a couple of hours to get to that point.
but it's right, but it's true, and it's a different way of looking at things. So, and I'll leave it at that. So we can move into the technical committee. Stop, we're near ahead. We'll move into project review and the technical committee report with Neil.
So I have more paper for you. Morning. The technical committee has met a couple of times this last quarter and reviewed effectively 3 projects. 1 in the city of Albany, 2 in the town of Guilderland. The project in the city of Albany is the landfill expansion and the habitat mitigation. And basically that project is moving right along, and I'll have more of that in the presentation I'm going to give you in a second. Morning.
Sure. Thank you.
The 2 projects in Guilderland, one is a small expansion of cross gates that we talked about previously. But the one I wanted to draw your attention to is the first one within the town of Guilderland. There is an applicant who is considering submitting an application to the town of Guilderland for a senior living and senior learning center within full protection area 3. The applicant met with us. They've been to get our preliminary thoughts, and then have been meeting with the town as they're putting together their application. As of yet, they have not submitted an application, so they've floated some concepts and wanted to get some initial responses from us while they're kind of trying to incorporate that into their application that they're submitting to the town. when they submit a full application, that will get forwarded to us by the town's planning board, and at that point, we'll give it a more thorough review through the technical committee.
How many acres is the parcel, and how many acres are they, at least from a preliminary point going to affect?
The whole parcel is what, 54? 56.
Yeah.
And what it looks like they're going to propose is to develop around 13. And potentially could consider conservation options for the remainder. Good question, John.
Which isn't built.
No, but, right, and it is full protection, but the non-buildable stuff is actually some good quality habitat. Some of you have seen this before, but I doctored it up. The last thing I wanted to briefly touch on of the technical committee's activity, we had a field trip last week, June 12th, to look at a number of the wildlife habitat restoration projects that are going on in the preserve. And you've got the handout, the details are spelled out there, but I did want to walk you through, I was asked to walk you through this, and I want to walk you through this briefly. Beautiful. I don't want to stand back there. You all see? So on June 12th, we had a restoration tour, and this is because for the last several years, the technical committee has been going out and visiting the habitat mitigation project around the landfill. That's about 100 acres of dedicated preserve land that the city of Albany is actively restoring as one of the required permit mitigation measures for their landfill expansion. But out of that, since we've been doing so much this year and over the winter, with thinning some forests, mowing scrub oak, we've had several prescribed fires, we actually took the 3-hour period and visited 5 different sites. There were 22 folks with us, which included almost all of the technical committee, a couple of board members, and a couple of academics, as well as a variety of DEC and park staff from central and regional offices. And you can see the map there, the 5 sites we visited. Now we'll revisit this map briefly, but the first site we visited was the habitat restoration project surrounding the landfill. And this year the city has largely completed, as of last week, most of the seeding of all of that preserved land around the landfill. And earlier phases of it that were seeded a couple of years ago now support high-quality, relatively high-quality wetlands for brand new restored wetland, man-made wetlands, but also about 30 acres of occupied cardinal blue butterfly habitat. Last year, not only, you'll hear more about the spotted turtles in executive session, not only did spotted turtles move into the habitat restoration site, and they're a listed species in New York State, but also, much to our surprise, cardinal blue butterflies moved in as well. And they are finding, last summer was the first time they found carners within the lupin patches out there, a couple, over the course of the second brood. This year, they're finding multiple animals every day they count. And by way of background, I just want to point out that all of this restoration work that I'm going to show you is geared obviously for restoring globally rare fire-dependent pitch pine scrub oak barrens, as outlined in our management plan, but also trying to advance the wildlife conservation goals of the state's comprehensive wildlife conservation strategy, as well as advance the federal recovery plan for the cardinal blue butterfly. So at the landfill, it's wetlands and uplands both, which is geared for all of those species, and in particular carners, and that's proving to be relatively successful. The second site we visited was one of several burns that have happened this spring, thanks to the great work of Tyler Briggs, our fire management and GIS specialist, and his seasonal staff. So we went next door and looked at a burn in Carter Barrens East on May 29th. We burned 43 acres. And again, that benefits, there's already lupin in some of these management units. Lupin will be subsequently seeded into some of the other management units that were burned out there. But I wanted to take a second to not only talk about that May 29th fire, but it has been a record-setting year this year, thanks to Tyler's work, good weather, and a contract burn boss that we've been working with. We've had 4 burn days, and in those 4 burn days, we've used prescribed fire on 186 acres. That's not only a seasonal record, that is an all-time total annual record for our burning, and there's still many days left in the year, we hope, where we can get some additional fire on the ground. And burned in Carner Barrens East, Carner Barrens West, Kings Road Barrens, and over in the Great Dune. And just real briefly, here are the 4 sites. So this picture I took 3 weeks after the fire in the Kings Road Barrens site. That was burned on April 14th. That was 47 acres. The Great Dune on May 20th was 46 acres. And that was a relatively forested site. We've never put fire into that part of the preserve before. And that's a combination of all of the work the staff are doing. Joel and dealing with invasive species and getting all the invasive species under control to enable Tyler to be able to utilize prescribed fire out there.
You know, what are the words cherry and
Yeah.
These are the management unit names that we give individual blocks of the preserve, which helps us remember where they are. It used to be a numbering system. Can't remember. Unit 1, Department 3, I don't know where that is.
Okay.
So whoever writes the prescription gets to name it, and that name sticks, and it's a great way for us to get familiar with the geography of the preserve. In Carner Barrens East on May 29th, again, that was 43 acres, three management units. And then on June 2nd, we burned, I'm sorry, that picture's so dark. It didn't look that dark on my laptop. On June 2nd, we burned 50 acres in Carner Barrens West, which consisted of 4 management units. And Carner Barrens West, because it is sandwiched between 155, the Thruway, and Old State Road, is particularly problematic to burn because of smoke management issues. So it was phenomenal that Tyler and his crew and our contract staff were able to make that happen. Back to our tour, we left the burn and went to, there's number 3. Site number 3, basically across the street from Rapp Road, and this is 27 acres that Joel has worked with contractors to thin. And across much of the preserve, we've got 3,200 acres in the preserve. Really only about a third of that is decent quality pitch pine scrub oak barrens. Much of that, due to suppressing fire for so long, has reverted to Appalachian oak pine forest. Still has the pine barrens vegetation embedded within that, but in order to restore that, it takes more than fire alone. So one of the things that we're doing, and this is the first time we've done it, the city of Albany did it on a lot of the acreage with the restoration site around the landfill, is to thin the forest, basically turn it back into savanna consisting of pitch pine and oaks, and then subsequently that will get planted to Carner blue butterfly habitat. One of the other sites where we did this, actually a former white pine colony, a white pine plantation, now supports an amazing population of lupin and potentially one of our biggest Carner sites. And this forest thinning is benefiting a lot of different rare wildlife, what we call young forest wildlife, like the red-headed woodpeckers and American woodcock. The 4th site was Kings Road Barrens, and there we went to see scrub oak mow and herbicide treatment, the effects of the scrub oak mowing and herbicide treatment, as well as Carner blue butterflies. And this is, again, due to fire suppression. Scrub oak itself became so dominant that lupin and the other plants that we need out there couldn't persist. So we're going out, mowing the scrub oak. When they sprout back up in the fall, we treat we treat individual clumps, individual sprouts with herbicide in a really controlled way, so we can target what gets herbicided and effectively thinning the scrub oak. Subsequently, we've burned these sites and planted them with lupin, and this site in particular, Kings Road Barrens, now supports our largest Carner blue butterfly population. And if I'm remembering Steve's numbers correctly, it was well over 1,000 animals last July were in this one site alone. And I won't steal Steve's thunder by telling you how many butterflies are in the preserve this spring, but it's as many as last summer. And it's benefiting other rare species as well. And the last site we went to kind of circles back to the forest thinning site that we visited earlier, was to, particularly for the technical committee, but also our partners. There's a lot more of that forest thinning work to do throughout the preserve. We're really going to turn the bulk of the 3,200 acres we have currently into high quality barrens. It's going to require going in and using silviculture to thin the forest, open it up, and reinstitute prescribed fire, plant lupin, and expedite the recovery of the Carner, the conservation of all of these other rare wildlife species, and the goals of the management plan. So we visited the Madison Avenue Pinelands, and this is an area that is planned to be thinned this winter, if all goes well. Joel's been working with contractors and getting the bids and so forth out. And this is largely what it looks like. It's a closed canopy forest, a whole bunch of plant species, maples and oaks and pitch pine, white pine. And when we're done with it, it'll look much like the site I showed you earlier, where we thin the forest. It'll be open. We'll be able to plant some additional lupin out there. It'll basically expedite restoration of pitch pine scrub oak barrens. This is our biggest, geographically, this is our biggest piece of the preserve that's not interrupted by roads, and it has the least amount of pitch pine scrub oak barrens in it. And that's purely a function of suppressing fire for so long. There are pockets embedded all throughout the area. And if we're able to do all of this work, thin the forest, follow it up with fire, we should be able to really expedite meeting the goals of the management plan. That was our tour. There are a little more details, a little more background within the handout that I provided. But we basically want to take an opportunity to fill you in and show the technical committee all the great work that our stewardship staff have been doing across the preserve.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Do people have any questions for Neil? Okay. Let's move along with Jeff Palmer, the Discovery Center report. Jeff?
Good morning. I would be remiss if I didn't touch on what Chris already talked about in some detail with the Discovery Center vision strategy, which morphed into the whole organization, the audience development plan, the operating plan, some of which are in various stages of completion, and it's been fairly labor intensive certainly for me, and will continue to be for all the staff. I want to thank the Discovery Center committee, or the board, serving on the vision strategy team, and continuing to serve to help us through this process, because it really will help to pave the way for our future. And just to touch on another thing Chris mentioned, we all know we're a globally aware ecosystem. It's one of the few in the entire world, and that we have identified not as a nature center, but as an interpretive center. And that makes us, to our knowledge, the only interpretive center in the entire world for this kind of ecosystem, because we don't know of any others. So, that boosts our cachet a little bit. We hosted several successful events, including our annual Lupin Fest with over 700 attendees, migration celebration in which we partnered with Audubon New York to announce the exciting news that we're now an important bird area, thanks to Neil Gifford and some great teamwork. Also the Farnsworth Middle School student silent auction, thanks to the Friends of the Pine Bush. Darwin Russa is here from the Friends. Thanks for coming, Darwin. And a Pine Bush Neighborhood Association meeting, which included Mayor Sheehan. Facility upgrades include a new, and if I may say, stunning Discovery Center sign over the entranceway as you're going out. If you haven't noticed it, turn back and take a look. Upgrades to the bird conservation exhibit to include the IBA, a new playscape area, a vernal pond window for the Discovery Corner, work on the native landscape project, installation of a story walk, several property and exhibit repairs, a new energy-saving hot water tank, kind of mundane, but these energy savings measures are important. And another energy-saving addition was variable speed drives with NYSERDA funding, an alarm in our server closet, which has the potential to save us thousands of dollars if that were to ever go down, and new decorative light covers for our special programs, which, for certain special programs, we put one up so you can see. We put these on all the lights, and it's kind of a fun addition. In terms of outreach, Wendy Craney is working closely with the Times Union and Hearst Media on a year-long campaign to raise awareness about the preserve and the commission. Among other events, we hosted a booth at Hannaford Kids Expo and spoke to 5,000 people that day. Connected with 5,000 people. There were 3 of us. We had our displays at 2 LL Bean sale weekends, and they're thrilled to partner with us, and they tell us about 7,000 people walk through their big sale weekends every time they hold those. Erin Keinel's education department offered an impressive selection of programs this spring, including Earth Week over the school vacation, where families and individuals helped with cleanup, invasive species removal, and more. The Help a Habitat program with over 600 students participating in transplanting more than 1,000 wild blue lupin plants into the preserve. the aforementioned Lupin Fest with the theme of Dune It All, recreation in the Pine Bush, with a nod to Jackie Citroniti for a great job coordinating our committee this year. And again, Migration Celebration, which included a presentation by local bird expert and radio personality Rich Guthrie. Some of you may hear him on WMC, so you may know him personally. As well as the Migration Challenge, an interactive obstacle course interpreting the challenges birds face in migration. So there's lots of great stuff going on. Those are just some of the highlights.
Good. Any questions for Jeff? No. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
So next we have our financial reports from Lisa Anthony.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We'll begin our review of the financial statements with our statement of financial activities, and this represents only 1 month for our fiscal year. Under revenue, dues and contributions are slightly under budget. Government grant income is on budget for the month of April. There are no mitigation fees for April. Lease revenue is right on budget. Other revenue is slightly higher than budget, and this is due to an increase in merchandise sales. Total revenue came in at 100% of budget for the month of April. Moving on to expenses, personnel and fringe are slightly over budget, and this is due to timing of our annual benefit payments in April, and this will level out over time. Travel and training, as well as contractual, communications, occupancy, and supplies and equipment are all on budget. Other expenses are slightly under budget, and this is just due to the timing of expenses. So overall, our revenue came in on budget, expenses slightly over budget, giving us a net loss of $28,000, and this is typical through the month of April because of our large benefit payments that come in. Are there any questions on that? Kind of simple. On to the statement of net assets. Under assets, our operating cash decreased due to the timing of operating expenses for the month of April. Conservation and land reserves are on budget and remain the same. Grant receivables, this is money owed from DEC. This increased, and this has not been paid as of yet. Accounts receivable is money owed for quarterly mitigation, and this was paid. Inventory remained the same. Prepaid expenses are 0, and this is due to the timing of year-end expenditures that fall into our next fiscal year. Investments increased $22,000 due to a positive performance in all 3 of our funds. Capital assets remained unchanged. Total assets decreased slightly over last year, mainly due to a decrease in cash and prepaid expenses. On to liabilities, our accounts payable and accrued expenses remain the same, as well as our deferred revenue. Investments in capital assets remained the same through the month of April. Reserve assets remained unchanged. Unreserved assets decreased. Overall, our total net assets decreased about $5,800, and this is due to a negative net operating income and a positive investment income of $22,000. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving on to the investment summary. All of the reserve fund, the Discovery Center endowment, and the endowment all had a positive performance, coming in at 0.52%, 0.25%, and 0.55%, giving us a total gain of $22,600. Any questions?
Thank you, Lisa. We're ahead of schedule, so I don't believe our auditors are here yet, are they? No. Let's move ahead on the schedule for action items. We'll skip over action item A because the investment policy statement is directly related to the audit. So if we could move to action item B, the operating budget. There's not a whole lot to say with the operating budget because this was prepared with the understanding that we would be receiving the extra $125,000 increase in our appropriation from the EPF this year. That is not going to happen because the Division of Budget, who makes decisions on how cash flows to the agencies, cut the cash to DEC, and therefore we do not get the addition as well. On the plus side, to look at it from a positive point of view, is we could have been cut as well, and we really didn't. So we didn't get our increase, but we're level from where we've been over the last 8 years. So the budget that we passed in December remains. So we don't have to take any action on it. questions.
It looked to me, when I was looking over that, it looked to me like most of the increase was going to be in contractual expenses.
Right.
And so I guess I'm kind of wondering, well, what would have been done and what's now
Sure.
not going to be done?
I mean, I can tell you what was budgeted. There was a placeholder for a position. As we go through this audience development plan, we're going through the whole vision strategy, and so I put a placeholder for a position. It would be a grade 13 position that would start like at the end of October and go through the end of the fiscal year. So I put that in with benefits as a placeholder. A grade 13 is like a $38,000 position, just so you know. We put in some equipment. We put in for a UTV, like the ATVs that are side-by-side for fire. We have one now, and we found out that it's the most effective thing that we can use. Even more so, we had considered a truck in the past, and a fully equipped vehicle like this is around $16,000 versus $45,000 for a truck. So that was in there. We put in $5,000 specifically for research for Neil, looking into this basically for bird safety glass, right, Neil? It's part of a research project, which is kind of a neat thing. Not a neat thing, but an important thing. And the balance we put in contractual, so that would go towards primarily additional underground habitat work. So with that said, we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, there is a possibility that could come through. So that budget is prepared. So if that happens, we'll bring it back to the board and we'll consider that. So, action item C is public authority compliance documentation. These are things that we have to prove every year. As we close June, based on our fiscal year, the majority of our reporting, and thank you, Lisa, she stepped out, there you are, for all your help working with me, primarily the work that you've done so far with all this Paris reporting. Remember, Paris is Public Authority Reporting Information System. It's the online system all public authorities have to go through for reporting. It's very, very onerous. It is not user-friendly. And I don't mean to badmouth anything. It's just really, really, it's slow. It locks up a lot. Lisa was trying to do some work in it earlier this week, and she couldn't do it, so I had to sign it on my computer. Worked on mine, but not hers. So it takes a lot of time, and I can't fathom how a large authority like the Thruway Authority can work through it. It's really a lot of work, so whatever the case. So these are 3 documents: the assessment of internal controls, the annual report on the prompt payment policy, and the annual report financial summary. These 3 need board to be reviewed by the board and approved, and then we upload them into Paris. So Marty, can you scroll to the first one? The assessment of internal controls. Basically what this says is we went through, if you scroll down to the very bottom, the report background is identical every year. This comes directly out of the Public Authorities Law. It's verbatim. You go to the certification. It says that we followed a process that assessed and documented the adequacy of its internal control structure and policies for the year ended March 31st. And if there were any deficiencies, we developed corrective action plans. There were no deficiencies. And you'll hear that in the presentation from the audit. But that assessment is right here in this document. The second one, you have to report on your prompt payment policy. All authorities have to have a prompt payment policy adopted, which we do. And basically that says when we get a bill from a contractor or any procurement action that we've taken, if that bill obviously is accurate, that we pay that within 30 days. And we pay all of our bills within 30 days.
Whether or not they give us any money.
No, we only spend money if it's budgeted. And basically what this means is if you do not do this, you're subject to interest penalties. Unfortunately, we have a good functioning administrative and finance department, and that's kudos to both Margaret and Lisa. So we pay checks, or we pay accounts payable every week. So, and the final one is the summary of financial information. And this is also in the documents that you have in front of you. I sent it all to you earlier this week. This is the final audit, the financial statement. So it's a summary of net assets for the year. You can scroll down, Marty, you can see the actual bottom of it. So the net assets, just like you saw with on the balance sheet that Lisa went over. Net assets are $10,228,000 plus. So I need actually, are there questions? Yes.
When you do internal controls, do you do any other risk assessment beyond just financial?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, give me an example. Like we do for compliance with
Like
policies.
Safety,
No.
no.
No, this only relates to finance.
Okay.
But we do that annually for safety. We do the safety training, and we have logs for all that. So, but it's not part of the whole. So
It's
the answer is yes.
Yeah,
But this
okay.
is very specific for the public authorities law. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll move that, make that motion.
Is there all in favor? Thank you. And we have updated policies and procedures. And we're going to stay on this. We're not going to scroll through all 62 pages. So just for some background, the Policies and Procedures Manual, the Employee Policies and Procedures Manual of the Commission, we first adopted in 2009 when we separated from the Nature Conservancy and went with the Natural Heritage Trust. So we developed our own. And every year we modify them, we update them for clarity as new things come up. So this time we spent a significant effort to go through them and really make them much more clear. You know, we asked staff for feedback, like, is there things that could be made more clear? Took that into consideration. Lisa, Margie, and I worked on them, and then worked closely with Larry. And Larry went through all these. So you can see there's a lot of changes in it. But there's repetition. There was repetition in this document to other procedures that we now have because of the public authorities law, like procurement requirements. All those things exist. So instead of having that all written out again, we just reference that document. Other things that could change over time, like for retirement, when there's an addition for the retirement system, like Tier 6 was added. So you have to keep going back. So we just eliminated that. We put the website on it. Same thing for Social Security information. So that's where the most up-to-date information is, and you reduce a lot of that. So.
Chris, I saw we were also representing the policies and procedures addressed volunteers as well, and we eliminated the volunteer from it, which seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Well, that's a good question, though, because basically what we have is this. This is the official document for the employees. We'll adopt this, and then we'll go back through, because we now have one just for volunteers, which is similar, but there's a lot of things that aren't applicable.
Yeah.
Retirement, Social Security, FMLA, all that stuff. So then we get rid of all that. We update it for what the changes are in this new document, and then we provide that to volunteers when they start to sign.
And we provide it to them? Do we ask them to sign it or to?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. They're required to sign it. Yeah. So it's like, think of it this way, for appropriate use of commission resources. So photocopy, right? The use of commission phones.
Yeah.
The commission phones aren't for personal phone calls at an extensive level. So things like that apply to volunteers. So if you have a volunteer, we have volunteers that will work here as interns, so they would be considered that. So they're applicable. And if the board's interested, you can see that too. I can send it to you. No. You can.
I just didn't want us chasing away volunteers by making
No.
them sign onerous things. After all, they are volunteering.
No, they.
Well, does it also, does that enable them to get workers' comp?
No. No. They're covered by our insurance, though.
So wouldn't that be a step, then it's for their benefit?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah. When we started this with volunteers about, I don't know, Lisa, Marty, a year and a half ago, something like that. We thought everybody's going to run away screaming. That's, if you volunteer for
Yeah.
parks, if you
Yeah.
volunteer for a lot,
Yeah.
anybody, any public agency, it's
Yeah.
all the same.
Okay.
And we haven't lost any of it, to my knowledge. Staff are back there? No? Okay. Any other questions on that one? No. Can I have a motion for
I'll make
action
the
item
motion.
D?
I'll make the motion.
John, is there a second?
Second.
Steve, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Hey, Chris?
Yeah,
If there's a little extra minute, can I go back to something on the technical committee?
we do have an extra minute because we're waiting for the auditors. 'Cause I came
Okay.
from an executive session. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Angela. You're just back there. No, go ahead. Because we're
Oh,
early.
You got a minute? Okay.
Yeah.
So I haven't been here long enough to understand like the sort of process flow from like a recommendation from the technical committee to
Sure.
the larger board. So
Sure.
with this project that's in the full protection area.
Yep.
So the technical committee will review this project. They'll come up with a recommendation of what the Pine Bush's position is on it.
Based on the management
To
plan.
the planning board of that jurisdiction.
Right. So here, I'll give you an example. So there's a development project proposed in Colony. So the technical committee would receive that proposal. All planning departments provide those proposals to us. They come to either my attention or Neil's attention. We then provide those to the technical committee. The technical committee, there's a representative on the committee for each ex officio member, so not for the citizen members. So for example, the town of Colony would be Mike Lyons, who also represents Paul Mahan on the board, but he's also a technical committee member. So, now that's not a good example, but so Mike would say, you know, the technical committee had this conversation about this development project. He goes back to his ex officio board member if necessary, and has a conversation about them if it's very controversial, and then would bring that back to the committee. And we provide them, we get the feedback from the technical committee now with email. That happens more quickly. And we provide a letter of comment, and Neil pens that letter and sends it to the planning board, typically the chair. So in that case, it would go to the planning board chair in the town of Colony. It goes in front of the board, and they consider our comments. And they take into consideration our comments along with anything else that may come in from the public. And our comments are based specifically on creating and managing a viable preserve, and our comments come out of the management plan for each area.
So in that one case that Neil mentioned, it was a proposal for a parcel that was slated for full protection.
Correct.
Yep.
They have not yet submitted an application to the municipality.
Right.
So they're evaluating their options, so they wanted to come in and have an informal conversation with the technical committee to understand the potential implications of the
Oh, I
management.
got it. It hasn't even been proposed yet.
No, so they
I
have not submitted an
understand.
application to Gilroy.
Okay, gotcha.
This is kind of what we would like to see more of. If you're going to propose a development, particularly in an area that's full protection, to come to the commission and then do a presentation to the technical committee, get their feedback before they even spend any money on engineering to submit a formal application.
Right, because I would assume if there's places that are designated full protection, there are places that are designated limited development.
Partial, yep.
Right, so.
Yeah. And then there's areas within the town that aren't within the study area that have no recommendation
Right.
as well, sometimes. Depends. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Sure. Okay. Angela Colvin with Wojcicki and Company. Angela is now our principal contact and auditor.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm just going to go over the two reports that we presented. I think you have the bound copies in
Yes.
front of you. The one that I'd really like to address is the one that's addressed to the board. It's a smaller of the two.
Okay.
Basically, this letter is a template, but this is what the vehicle that we use to report any findings that we're required to report to the board. So that's why this is an important document. Basically, our significant audit findings. Management is responsible for the selection and use of appropriate accounting policies. The significant accounting policies used by the commission are described in Note A to the financial statements. There has been no new accounting policies adopted during the year, and the application of existing policies was not changed during the year. There were no transactions, excuse me, recognized in the financial statements for which there is a lack of authoritative guidance, and everything was recognized in the appropriate period. Now, accounting estimates, there's usually a variety of accounting estimates in the financial statements themselves. The most significant one in these financial statements is the market value of the investments. And we actually evaluate the key factors and the estimates. It's reasonable in relation to the financial statements as a whole. We encountered no significant difficulties during the audit. There were no corrected journal entries or past journal entries, which is a lot to be said for the accounting of the commission. There were no disagreements with management. We requested management to sign a rep letter, which they have signed. Sometimes management consults with other accountants to get like a second opinion on accounting policies. We are pleased to report that that did not happen to our knowledge. We generally discuss a variety of matters, including the application of accounting policies prior to the engagement. However, those communications were not a condition to our retention. Other matters, the very first section of the financial statements is management's discussion and analysis. Basically, we did not audit that information. That's all management's information provided to you. The only thing that we did do is we kind of tick and tie and make sure the numbers all agree to our financial statements. So I just wanted to point out that we do not actually express an opinion on the MD&A. There is supplemental information in the financial statements, which is the investment information, and we did actually audit that information. So that is in compliance with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. That's the required report to the board, okay? The next thing is the financial statements, and as I noted previously, we did not make any adjustments, so these are management's numbers. On page 1 is the management's discussion and analysis, which was prepared by management, and the only thing that we did was, like I said, tick and tie and make sure it agrees to our audited numbers. On page 5 is our independent auditor's report. Basically, it says that we audited these financial statements. Management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of these financial statements, and they're also responsible for designing, implementing, and maintenance of internal control to make sure that the presentation of the financial statements is free of material misstatements. Our responsibility is to actually audit these numbers in accordance with U.S. government auditing standards. We believe that the audit evidence we obtain is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our audit opinions. And in our opinion, the financial statements are in all material respects in conformance with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. This is what we call a clean opinion. There are no audit findings. Other matters, the required supplemental information, which is the management's discussion and analysis, we are not presenting an opinion on that. And the last thing is the supplemental information was subjected to our auditing procedures. And in addition, since this is in accordance with government auditing standards, there is a report on compliance and internal control in relation to our audit, not in general. The numbers, I'm not sure, I missed what your presentation was, but on page 8 is your statement of net position, which is a balance sheet in the for-profit world. It's a very healthy balance sheet. Total assets are $10 million compared to 9.9 in the prior year. So, I mean, your assets minus your liabilities of $146,000 brings your net position or equity in the for-profit world to $10 million. So this is a very healthy statement of net position. Page 9 is your statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, which is in the for-profit world of income statement. Again, very healthy, revenues about the same. Your operating gain is up a little bit from the prior year. which brings you to your net position number or your equity number of $10 million. The statement of cash flows is basically it tells where the organization got cash from and what happened to it. So it reconciles your beginning cash to your ending cash. And basically, the commission generated $556,000 in cash by operating, and they spent $653 in investing, which brings them a net decrease in cash, which when added to their beginning cash gives you your ending cash. On page 11, you start the footnotes. Note A, as I mentioned in the report to the board, is about the organization and their significant accounting policies, and there have been no changes from the prior year. Note B talks about the investments, the makeup of the investments, and how the investment income was calculated. Note C is tells you exactly what happened in your capital assets, your beginning balance, additions, subtractions to come up with your ending balance. Note D gives you a little bit more about the functional expenses that were on the income statement. Note E, F, and G are basically unchanged from the prior. They just give you a little bit more information. Your compliance report is on page 18. Basically, it describes our work in relation to internal control and on compliance. Basically, we're just testing internal control and compliance in relation to our audit, and we're not reporting on the entity as a whole, internal control and compliance. Under the section internal control over financial reporting, basically it explains what deficiencies are, material weaknesses, and significant deficiencies. We did not identify, we're happy to report, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we consider to be material weaknesses. Under compliance, we did note one non-compliance that we are required to report under government auditing standards, and that's described in the investment information on the last page, so I'll get to that. And the purpose of this report is because this is an audit performed in accordance with government auditing standards. And on page 20 is the last page. Basically, this quotes the investment information for New York State. The investments were valued at $4 million at March 31st. The earnings were $191,000. The investment report, basically that says, New York State issues investment guidelines for public authorities, and the commission has its own investment policy, and actually there was an instance of non-compliance in their asset allocation in two of their investment accounts. And the fees and commissions were $31,000 for the end of the year. I know I went through that fast. Does anybody have any questions?
We'll follow up on the non-compliance. That's the information that I sent along to the board and the memo from Larry and I, and that'll tie directly into the investment policy, which is the first action item A. But you can also ask Angela about that too.
I guess, given this more specific information we received from Chris, it's curious to me that more detail of that is not reported in this document. I assume it's not required, or you would have reported it, but I don't know, can you clarify that? Or?
Yeah, actually, okay. U.S. government auditing standards are nationwide. That investment guidelines for New York State public authorities is a state document, a state requirement. So the kind of the reporting is completely different. It's not really incorporated into our professional guidance. So that's why it's just kind of in a supplemental information. It's just kind of an awareness for the board that, they need to either implement additional procedures to make sure that doesn't happen, or change policies or whatever. So it's just kind of a New York State particular item.
Would it be accurate for me to say that if it was a significant weakness, it would be in a management letter?
Yes, it would be in the management letter, and it'll also be in the report to the board.
Right. And that's not the
Which, when I went
case.
through that, that was not noted in there.
There is no, this is the second year in a row, there is no management letter, which is a good thing.
Right, very good. Management is very aware of the issue, and their response was very speedy and acceptable, even though I'm not reporting on that. But it was actually, I was kind of overwhelmed though at how speedy and whatever that Chris and Lisa responded to that finding.
The only other thing I would say is Angela offered the audit committee, because she met with the audit committee to go through this in much more significant detail, to go into an executive session with the committee if the committee wished to, have any feedback to the auditors without staff. So Lisa and I would have exited, and they declined that. But that's the same goes for the board too. So I have that built into executive session, if that's okay. So if people want, if you could stay for that.
Sure.
Okay. And if people are not, I'll leave it up to you. We'll do that in executive session. Are there other questions for Angela? Thanks, Katie. No? Great. Thank you. So let's move into that investment policy. So as a follow-up to that memo, the memo that came from Larry and I was a recommendation of the audit committee after the discussion that we had with the issue of non-compliance with the investment policy. And the easiest way to summarize that is that the asset pools, cash, fixed income, and equities were looked at as an aggregate, not individually. So in the investment policy statement, the equity spread is a minimum of 25% and a maximum of 60%. So of the three accounts, the reserves, the Discovery Center endowment, and the endowment, the two endowments exceeded 60%. They ranged between 61 and 65%. So, and that's because of market fluctuations. It was to the commission's benefit. It may not have been, but this year it was fortunate that it was to the commission's benefit. But it was both Key Bank, our financial manager, and our own internal interpretation of looking at the investment policy statement that term aggregate is what we were following. And the auditors disagreed with that, and they felt that it could be made more clear. So with that, we came up with a way of working with the audit committee to improve, it's on page 8, Marty, improve the language of the investment policy statement. And Mike Lyons and Don Sapas, who helped with this at the audit committee, if there's anything you want to say, but I'll just go through the changes. So in this first one, the asset allocation guidelines, we made it more specific to say that in order to have a reasonable probability of consistently achieving the Commission's long-term return objectives, the asset allocation policies outlined below have been adopted for each managed pool. So not combined, but each one of those asset classes. And then we added some language for additional clarity. The minimum and maximum percentages must be in compliance for each asset class individually. And then we got rid of that word aggregate, so it's not that pool, it's for each one. In the event that the above asset allocation guidelines are violated at the end of the reporting period, so we added additional clarity there, for reasons including but not limited to market price fluctuations, which we were experiencing, we moved it from the Director of Finance and Operations instructing the investment manager. That's what we're paying part of these fees for. It was recognized we paid $31,000 in fees. We want to put that on the investment manager. So the investment manager will bring that portfolio into compliance with the guidelines as promptly and as prudently as possible. Yeah.
Is that an annual reporting period or a quarterly reporting period?
It-
Monthly, okay.
I was going to say monthly. It is monthly, is it
It's
not?
monthly, and it's a snapshot on the 15th of each month.
Thank you, that's what it
Depending on the
is.
market that day.
But so Alan, just as long as there's an opportunity to kind of adjust this
Yes.
during the year. and
Yeah,
not wait till
it's
the-
not quarterly, right, and it's so, the investment report that Lisa gives you, when you see that, so if we're at the end of the month and the market's been doing well, we say, well, why are the percentages not so high? It's because it's just on the 15th of each month. Anything audit committee wants to add? Mr. Treasurer?
We have the words to modify to get back into compliance as
Prudently and promptly as possible.
exactly. So prudently would hopefully allow the investment manager the
Flexibility.
flexibility to make changes that benefit us. So we don't miss all the highs, we don't ride all the lows, you know, all that kind of thing.
Right, right. It's the responsibility of the financial manager to do that, to make changes in a way that maximize the commission's return based on the objectives that we stated in the IPS.
Because if it's
So it's not just immediately cut
Yeah, if
things.
it's autocratic like that, then we miss opportunities.
Right. Do you think that's adequate,
Yeah.
Steve?
And and this is already part of this person's job description in terms of our contract with the financial manager.
Yes. Yep. Yep. We, when this was brought to our attention, as Angela noted, we went to Key Bank within, I don't know, 5 minutes. I'm not kidding. And they said, oh, our interpretation is that it's aggregate. I'm like, well, let's change it right now and keep it at the 60% until we have clarification. So that's where we are. They've already made the changes.
Are they happy with that change?
They don't have to be, frankly.
I said, are they? I mean,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Are they in agreement? Sure. Yep. They have to do whatever their client asks. So even if their client has say equities of like 5 to 10%, so there's really no return, they have to implement it.
Yeah, but
they were in full agreement. And-
Okay.
And it's
Again, you
it's
can-
equal to similar organizations like ours, nonprofits and other small government agencies. That's really the answer. Any other questions on the IPS investment policy, Steve? Okay, can I have a motion for that?
I'll move revision of the IPS as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. I'll second.
Mike? All in favor? Okay. Thank you. So we need to move into executive session. So I need to report on what we're going to executive session for. First, we're going to approve the minutes from the last board meeting. Then we have the opportunity to meet with the auditor. I also need to talk about personnel issues, good personnel issues. People always look at me like it's good stuff. It's fine.
Personnel matters.
Personnel matters. Thank you, Mr. Sabas. That's more accurate. Carl Parker is here from DEC. He's going to give a presentation on his spotted turtle research. We can't do that in public session because of the sensitivity of the habitat and the potential for poaching. And then I have a real property conversation I want to have. So can we move into executive session? Can I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So I need everyone to go, but session.
Yes.
Second.
John, Nancy. Okay. Any other business? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Harvey? Donna? All in favor? Thank you.